Hello, I'm Steve Dayock, sending greetings to my friends François Roby and François Sebesi, to attendees of the conference, September 11th, 2001, Duty of Memory, and to 9/11 truth seekers everywhere. It has been 17 years, but I can remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when the World Trade Center was attacked. I'm sure most of us can. For those of you who were too young to remember, 2001 was a time when cell phones didn't have cameras, when internet social media was a text-only chat room, and when YouTube was nothing more than a gleam in the all-seeing eye of the intelligence services. Compared to today, in 2001, online resources were limited. For me, I was driving to work when I heard the news, and when I arrived, I recall at first no one knew what happened. Like a scene from a disaster movie, an explosion had left the North Tower of the World Trade Center with a gaping, grinning hole in its side, belching clouds of dust, paper, and smoke. As the networks focused their cameras on the north face of the North Tower, the first witness reports rolled in. Some people said it was a bomb. Some people said it was a small plane. Some people said they saw missiles, but CNN chose to lead with what one of their executives, Sean Murtaugh, said, which was that it was a large commercial jet, providing a clue as to how the ruse was accomplished. Using the power of suggestion, they were setting the stage for the assault on our senses and the challenge to our collective sanity, which was just around the corner when they broadcast what we thought was a plane flying through a steel building. Shock and awe is a term used to describe the military strategy of rapidly dominating an enemy by applying overwhelming force. On 9/11, the enemy was we the people, and the overwhelming force was the firepower of the Western propaganda machine. It was then that the powers that be declared war on the rest of us, and as is so often the case in war, the initial bombardment was intended to beat us into submission and eliminate all chance of resistance. Under a relentless, days-long barrage of terrifying images and descriptions of the horror taking place in Lower Manhattan, we were predictable putty in the propagandist's hands, for a while. Today, though, with the benefit of a decade and a half of hindsight, in the archived broadcasts from the morning of September 11th, it can be seen how easily we were fooled. The networks disregarded the reports from witnesses on the streets in favor of the story being told by their executives, and because there was only a short 18-minute period between the first explosion and the live shots of United Airlines Flight 175, we didn't have time to question anything. As a testament to the efficacy of propaganda, still to this day what appears to be the vast majority of humanity is hopelessly spellbound by what amounted to a cheap special effect delivered with a straight face by government and media figureheads which allegedly have the best interests of we the people in mind, but which were in fact preying on and manipulating our trusting nature and indoctrinated faith in authority into making us believe impossible things. Their apparent goal was to force us into choosing between maintaining one's intellect by seeing 9/11 for the fraud it is, or following the crowd and fading into what the late Gerard Holmgren called intellectual senility. Unfortunately, the world chose the latter, with the fruits of our shared apathy and willful ignorance being a burgeoning global police state, endless war, and a shameful record of looting, murder, and torture. As time passed and the fog of war lifted, people started to realize something was seriously wrong with the official story, and many turned to the 9/11 truth movement for comfort, thinking at least someone was doing something about it. We could see money being raised, petitions being signed, court cases being opened, billboards being displayed, and even Richard Gage on C-SPAN. But if you set aside the rhetoric and examine the results of their activism, all the truth movement has accomplished is to prevent an open discussion of the facts. Finding the truth, the actual truth about what happened that day, is nearly impossible by following the work of the 9/11 truth movement. The leaders will simply ignore evidence that contradicts their arguments and carry on like they never saw it. They then publicly argue among themselves as if only their hypotheses carry any weight, while pointing a hypocritical finger at each other and at everyone else for being a spy. I am no expert, but this is exactly what I would expect from false prophets in a bogus peace movement. I suspect this is what controlled opposition looks like. By now it should be obvious exposing the truth was never the goal, that their intent all along was to divide and conquer us. Good propaganda always targets emotion, not reason, which explains why truthers are often angered when someone challenges whatever it is we believe happened on 9/11, because we are emotionally attached to it. But the truth is what it is, whether or not it agrees with us or with what the 9/11 truth movement is selling. If the truth is the goal, it should be a threat to nobody. Or as Flannery O'Connor put it, the truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it emotionally. The reality is I could only be sure about me. I know I'm not on anyone's payroll, but when I examined the evidence, I came to a completely different conclusion than the rest of the truth movement. Nobody should take my word for anything. I urge everyone to scrutinize my research and my conclusions carefully, and I wish the leaders of the truth movement would say the same. None of us should take at face value any claim without first examining the evidence for ourselves, but we have been too busy raising families and living our lives to afford more than a cursory glance at 9/11. Sorting through the dead-end clues and false leads requires a time commitment most of us aren't prepared for. The fact is, very few of us can do any research at all, so we trust other people to bring us the truth, something we have been trained to do since we were old enough to read the news in the daily papers. We are not immortal beings with endless time, so more often than not, the way we arrive at the truth is to believe whatever suits us. This explains why truthers almost never consider that the best way to control the opposition is by leading it. It also explains why the leaders of the opposition are more interested in keeping us occupied with red herrings and infighting while the war machine marches on than they are with exposing the lies that started the wars to begin with. We're lying to ourselves. You know whether or not you're being honest in your investigation, and you know how to verify whether or not the leader you're following is being honest too. Since grade school, we were taught the best way to acquire knowledge is by applying the scientific method, and it is long past time for the truth movement to apply it to 9/11, to prove or disprove something, anything. Anyone that sincerely wants the truth needs to examine whatever 9/11 hypothesis they're attached to and ask themselves if it can withstand such scrutiny. If it can't, then it can't be the truth. Fortunately, the veneer is wearing thin and the truth is rising. Thanks to the work of people such as François Sebesi and François Roby, the scientific method is making a comeback in 9/11 research. I know these two gentlemen through a peace project on which we've been collaborating called 9/11 Crash Test. If you haven't heard of us, you can thank the 9/11 Truth Movement for that. We are not under their control, consequently they are forced to ignore us. In the spirit of the Mythbusters show, the idea is to mount a real section of wing from a 767 on a rocket sled and collide it at 550 plus miles per hour with steel box columns built to the same specifications as the World Trade Center at the point of impact. My colleagues and I are attempting to prove or disprove a hypothesis, something no other truth group dares to attempt. By using physics and empirical experimentation, we can prove the jet impacts were faked by the media, but proving what didn't happen is only part of the project. If we ever do manage to get rocket sled test center time, we will also attempt to prove what did happen. We will do this by using the photographic evidence we all have at our disposal to recreate the damage as found. A genuine forensic investigation begins by examining the evidence at the crime scene, but this is evidence the 9/11 Truth Movement won't touch. Obviously, if the popular truth groups are under control, then logically the truth will be found where they fear to tread, the impact holes at all 3 9/11 sites. Identify how they were cut, and you will identify the most likely suspects. 9/11 Crash Test proposes diverting a tiny portion of the millions of dollars the American truth groups accept to prove once and for all whether or not what we saw on television depicted a real event. For a fraction of what the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth collect every year, we can eliminate the no planes contention altogether and simultaneously eliminate a major hurdle in uniting the opposition under one banner. Seizing this opportunity would prove to the world that the disparate 9/11 truth groups can work together to apply the scientific method to solve problems, which would instantly change the public impression of the movement from one of tinfoil hat-wearing nutters to one of serious peace activists capable of challenging the status quo. Personally, I can think of no greater problem that needs solving than 9/11's endless war on terror. Our project, 9/11 Crash Test, is just one example of an idea that can end the impasse and the inertia of the 9/11 truth movement. I'm sure there are other ideas, and this conference is the perfect place to discuss them. But to continue signing the same petitions and following the same leaders in circles is madness. Something needs to change. 6 years ago, 9/11 Crash Test released its first video entitled "Tired of War Without End." In that video, I said that if you're like me and don't want to leave your grandchildren a world where they can be sent to war believing impossible lies, then we the people must work together to expose the truth. It is now 2018, and this anniversary marks a grim milestone that looms like a tombstone for the 9/11 truth movement to consider. Anyone born after September 11th, 2001 will be able to enlist in the U.S. military to fight in the wars, born of a lie, told before they were born. If this Orwellian nightmare is not the kind of world you want to leave to your children, then it is up to each of us to speak the truth. It can be difficult at first, but you're not alone. 9/11 Crash Test has your back. 17 years ago, no one knew what happened, but those days are over. Today we can prove what happened, and the only thing standing in our way is the 9/11 truth movement. Thanks again to François Roby, François Sebesi, and to concerned people the world over for giving the truth and peace a chance.